Gaming Week 10, Day 3, Rift Front Conflict, Nexus Descent. Part 1, Rift Front Tensions. Session Theme, Faction Ambush, Rift Expansion, Syndicate Espionage. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Time, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Setting, Nexus Plaza, Breach Glass Markets. Theme, Syndicate Patrols, Breach Instability, Player Confrontation. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 9 a.m. The studio kitchen hums with quiet conversation and the sizzle of Jonah, Bill, burning another round of toast. Michael, Marcus, sits at the counter, nursing coffee and flipping through breach schematics, while Jessica, Nyx, picks at a bowl of cereal, watching the chaos unfold. Kristen, Flavia, attempts to salvage what's left of Jonah's breakfast attempt. Kristen, Flavia. You're really bad at this, Jonah. It's toast. Literal fire bread. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. I'm just seasoning it with character. Jessica, Nyx. You're seasoning the fire alarm. Michael quietly sips his coffee, already tuned into the day's session. Steve, GM, pokes his head in briefly, eyeing the smoke detector warily. Steve, GM. Flat, burn the kitchen down and you start the session with negative HP. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 10 a.m. Michael, Marcus, meticulously stacks breach tokens beside his notes. Kristen, Flavia, quietly rolls a d20, humming to herself. Jonah, Bill, leans back, precariously balancing his chair on two legs, spinning a breach grenade figurine between his fingers. Jessica, Nyx, narrows her eyes at the projected vault layout flickering on the table. Steve, GM, watches, waiting for Jonah to inevitably crash backward. Steve, GM. Vault 43's outer plaza hums with breach static. Syndicate patrols are doubling around the rift access nodes. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. How sturdy do you think those patrols are? Hypothetically, hex may be sealed, but it lingers, waiting for the smallest disturbance to awaken again. Michael, Marcus. Don't even think about it. Kristen, Flavia. He's thinking about it. Jessica, Nyx. Smirking. He always thinks about it. In-game, IG, Nexus Plaza, Breach Glass Market Lanes. The air crackles faintly as breach light flickers along the edge of the market square. Syndicate enforcers move in pairs, their blue visor lights casting eerie reflections against breach glass surfaces. Vendors pack up hastily, sensing the rising tension as rift energy pulses from the plaza's core. A single stabilizer flickers unevenly, its internal mechanism strained beneath the metasphere's weight. Flavia crouches near the shadows of an abandoned stall, her eyes trailing the route of patrolling syndicate operatives. Marcus stands behind her, his gaze fixed on the shifting breach node pulsating in the distance. Jonah lags behind, whistling quietly as he spins a modified breach grenade between his fingers. Nyx kneels at the edge of the plaza, eyes narrowing as she traces latent glyph patterns burned into the stone. Nyx, Jessica. Softly, patrol routes are too tight. They're expecting something. Marcus, Michael. They know we're near Vault 43. We have two options. We draw them out or go loud and direct. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, I like the second option. Flavia, Kristen. Of course you do. Marcus's scanner flickers. A syndicate enforcer breaks off from his patrol, moving closer to the breach node. The soft hum of his visor crackles faintly through the tense air. Jonah tilts his head, clutching the breach grenade just a little tighter. Jonah, Bill. So, just a little one? A distraction. Marcus, Michael. Flat, Jonah. Game dice skill checks. Marcus, Michael game die 15, tactics, analyzes syndicate routes and identifies weak points in their formations. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 18, Stealth, slips undetected between two market stalls, preparing to disrupt patrols. Jonah, Bill Game Die 13, Dexterity, accidentally draws Syndicate attention when his grenade slips slightly from his grip. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 16, Investigation, locates a breach weak point beneath the stabilizer. Steve, GM. The Syndicate Enforcer's head tilts, visor locking onto Jonah. Two more guards adjust their formation and begin approaching the plaza. Marcus, you notice their comm spike. They're radioing something in. Marcus, Michael. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. Oops. Narrative progression. The Syndicate patrol identifies the team, triggering combat or stealth-based evasion in the next segment. Jonah's misstep shifts Syndicate patrols toward the market entrance, forcing the team to reroute or escalate. Nyx's investigation highlights a potential vault destabilizer hidden beneath the plaza, revealing a future objective. Next segment, Part 2, Syndicate Confrontation, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Part 2, Syndicate Confrontation. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Theme, Faction Ambush, Rift Expansion, Syndicate Espionage. Session Time, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Setting, Nexus Hall, Vault 43 Access Points. Theme, Breach Pulse Diversion, Combat or Negotiation. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 12 p.m. Jonah, Bill, munches on leftover burnt toast, unbothered by the collective disgust from the rest of the table. Kristen, Flavia, scrolls through breach node diagrams, occasionally flicking a die toward Jonah's plate. Michael, Marcus, silently sharpens his pencil, clearly waiting for something to explode. Jessica, Nyx, watches Jonah with an arched brow. Jessica, Nyx, you're aware that's not edible, right? Jonah, Bill, grinning, adds flavor to the game. Michael, Marcus, flat, let me guess. You're going to flavor this session with more explosions. Steve, GM, smirking. As a reminder, Syndicate patrols have a particular distaste for your brand of culinary chaos. In-game, IG, Nexus Hall, Vault 43 Access. A sharp rift pulse echoes down the corridor, distorting the breach glass walls momentarily. Syndicate enforcers reposition, their visors dimming slightly as system recalibrations flicker. The plaza tightens, soldiers forming defensive lines around the central breach stabilizer. The atmosphere grows dense with tension. Marcus signals the team to halt, his eyes locking onto the lead enforcer coordinating orders from a data console. Flavia melds into the shadows, sliding along a collapsed vendor stall while Jonah toys with a breach grenade, the pin dangerously close to slipping free. Nyx kneels beside Marcus, quietly deciphering the glyph tracings glowing along the vault's threshold. Nyx, Jessica. Softly, glyphs indicate a pulse lock. We trigger that, and the Syndicate focus will shift. Marcus, Michael. Can you disrupt it quietly? Jonah, Bill. Grinning, or loudly. I'm open to either. Flavia, Kristen. Whispering, we could try avoiding them altogether. Within 15 feet. DC 14 dexterity save for half damage. Steve, GM. Jonah's grenade twitches precariously. The enforcer tilts his head in your direction, beginning to advance. Game die skill checks. Marcus, Michael Game die 18, Diplomacy, attempts to negotiate distraction while feigning breach node repairs. Flavia, Kristen Game die 17, Stealth, slips undetected behind enemy lines, aiming for the vault's side entrance. Jonah, Bill Game die 14, Sleight of Hand, accidentally activates the grenade's priming mechanism but manages to disable it just in time. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 16, Arcana, overloads the breach pulse system, triggering a controlled destabilization. Steve, GM. The breach pulse ignites, sending a low-frequency ripple across the plaza. Syndicate guards scramble, believing a vault collapse is imminent. Marcus, Michael. Let's move. Now. Jonah, Bill. Laughing, see? Sometimes loud is just as effective. Narrative progression. The syndicate focus shifts to managing the breach pulse, allowing the team a narrow window to advance deeper toward Vault 43. Flavia uncovers an alternate entrance through unstable breach glass corridors, potentially bypassing further patrols. Jonah's near accident cements syndicate wariness of breach anomalies, increasing patrol density for future encounters. Next segment, Part 3, Vault Access and Rift Node Expansion, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Part 3, Vault Access and Rift Node Expansion. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Theme, Faction Ambush, Rift Expansion, Syndicate Espionage. Session Time, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Setting, Vault 43 Perimeter, Breach Glass Corridors. Theme, Breach Instability, Relic Recovery, Syndicate Suppression. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 2 p.m. Jonah, Bill, wipes imaginary dust from his dice, shaking them theatrically. Kristen, Flavia, scribbles notes furiously, likely drafting breach bypass plans for the next vault phase. Michael, Marcus, traces patterns over the table projection, tracking unstable rift zones. Jessica, Nyx, leans back, idly flicking breach tokens across the table, one landing precariously on Jonah's character sheet. Jonah, Bill. That's clearly a sign. I vote Vault Dive, Chaos first. Kristen, Flavia. You vote that every time. Michael, Marcus. I think we'd prefer a vault to actually exist when we're done. Jessica, Nyx. Grinning. A little breach collapse just adds to the flavor. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Perimeter, Breach Glass Corridors. Vault 43's entrance looms ahead, its breach glass frame humming faintly. Static pulses flicker along the corridor walls, the metasphere bleeding into the physical realm. Cracks spider along the ground, thin traces of blue breach light seeping from within. Marcus kneels at the threshold, scanning the vault's perimeter with practiced focus. Flavia drifts along the outer edge, boots gliding silently across rift-worn stone. Jonah leans lazily against a broken stabilizer, gently tapping its flickering interface. Nyx studies the breach glass, her fingers tracing faint glyphs buried beneath its translucent surface. Nyx, Jessica. This vault is barely holding. Rift destabilization is crawling along the lower chamber. Marcus, Michael. Nods. If we don't reinforce it, collapse is inevitable. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. Or, we speed it up and see what comes out. Flavia, Kristen. Jonah, I swear if you touch anything. Marcus taps a vault panel. A soft vibration hums beneath his fingertips as glyph patterns shift and recalibrate. The breach stabilizer flickers weakly, half responding to the ancient interface. Marcus, Michael. There's something deeper in the vault. Stabilizers are barely registering. Steve, GM. As you interact with the panel, a faint pulse echoes from below. Breach energy ripples outward, triggering a low-frequency hum across the corridor. Game Die skill checks. Marcus, Michael Game Die 15, Investigation, analyzes the vault interface and stabilizes breach output temporarily. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 18, Perception, spots faint movements beyond the vault entrance, indicating potential syndicate operatives. Jonah, Bill Game Die 13, Engineering, tampers with breach stabilizers, accidentally intensifying local rift distortions. Nix, Jessica Game Die 17, Arcana, identifies a concealed rift node beneath the vault's foundation. Steve, GM. Flavia, as you scan the corridor, you catch glimpses of shifting shadows, syndicate agents moving just beyond breach reflection. They haven't engaged yet, but their proximity is closing. Encounter, syndicate pursuit at Vault 43. Campaign arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Encounter type, combat or stealth, player choice. Setting, Vault 43 perimeter, breach glass corridors. Objective, evade or defeat syndicate operatives securing the vault. Encounter setup. The corridor's breach glass walls shimmer faintly, distorting reality with rift reflections that shift unnaturally. Syndicate operatives, their visors glowing blue, move with trained precision, skimming the perimeter just beyond visual contact. Their neural feeds sync with vault stabilizers, allowing them to manipulate breach fluctuations in real time. Steve, GM. You catch the glint of syndicate rifle scopes reflecting off breach glass. Their approach is slow, deliberate. They're sweeping for breach anomalies or you. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, I say we jump them first. Preemptive diplomacy. Marcus, Michael. Flat, Jonah, no. Flavia, Kristen. Whispers, we could just not engage. Wild idea. Nix, Jessica. Smirking, I vote we let Jonah do his thing. Worst case, we run. Phase 1, stealth or ambush. Player options. Stealth path, slip through breach corridors, avoiding direct conflict by syncing with vault shadows. Ambush path, strike first, using the unstable rift nodes as cover to gain a tactical advantage. Game Die skill checks. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 19, stealth, silently positions behind syndicate patrol, ready to intercept. Marcus, Michael Game Die 17, tactics, identifies weak points in patrol formations, coordinating the group. Jonah, Bill Game Die 13, engineering, attempts to destabilize nearby rift panels to disorient syndicate forces. Nix, Jessica Game Die 14, perception, tracks syndicate drone activity along breach glass walls. Steve, GM. Jonah's tampering causes a low hum to vibrate across the corridor. Rift light flickers, and one syndicate operative pauses, scanning the area more closely. Marcus, Michael. Softly, Jonah. I swear if you trigger an anomaly, you're taking point. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, that's fair. I love point. Phase 2, combat escalation. Trigger, if stealth fails or players opt for combat. Enemies, scaling by players' actions. 2 syndicate riflemen, medium armor, Tesla rifles. 1 syndicate vanguard, shield unit, close combat specialist. 1 breach drone, tracking and stabilizer override capabilities. Game Die skill checks, combat. Marcus, Michael Game Die 18, attack, disarms a syndicate rifleman with calculated precision. Jonah, Bill Game Die 12, explosives, detonates a breach grenade too close, scattering shrapnel unpredictably. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 20, critical hit, melee, takes down the syndicate vanguard in a single fluid strike. Nix, Jessica Game Die 16, hacking, overloads the breach drone, causing it to disable nearby syndicate stabilizers. Jonah, Bill. That grenade was mostly intentional. Flavia, Kristen. If you blow us up, I'm looting your corpse. Nix, Jessica. I call dibs on the grenades. Phase 3, resolution and aftermath. Success. Players secure the corridor, disabling syndicate reinforcements. Vault stabilizers recalibrate, but rift anomalies deepen. Partial success. Syndicate forces retreat, but not without leaving surveillance beacons to track further vault activity. Failure. Syndicate forces overpower the team, triggering vault lockdown measures. Breach destabilization escalates, complicating future vault entry. Steve, GM. As the last Syndicate enforcer falls, the vault hums ominously. Stabilization may have succeeded, but the metasphere senses the conflict, shifting unpredictably. Marcus, Michael. Sighs. Next time, Jonah doesn't get grenades. Jonah, Bill. Next time, bigger grenades. Loot/rewards. Breach stabilizer core, rare component. Syndicate access codes, encrypted. Central defense, providing cover fire. Tesla rifle, recovered from fallen Syndicate riflemen. Narrative progression. Jonah's tampering risks vault destabilization, advancing breach expansion in the next phase. Flavia's discovery of Syndicate forces introduces the potential for confrontation. Nyx's detection of a hidden rift node suggests an alternate path or secret objective within Vault 43. Next segment, Part 4, Rift Veil Activation, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Part 4, Rift Veil Activation. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Theme, Faction Ambush, Rift Expansion, Syndicate Espionage. Session Time, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Setting, Vault 43 Interior, Rift Stabilization Zone. Theme, Breach Veil Awakening, Environmental Hazards, Relic Discovery. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 4 p.m. The team reconvenes at the table, Jonah, Bill, dramatically recounting his heroic grenade toss from the prior encounter. Kristen, Flavia, stacks her dice neatly, visibly unimpressed. Michael, Marcus, updates faction standings while Jessica, Nyx, reboots her character sheet HUD, faintly smirking at Jonah's antics. Steve, GM, scrolls through breach fail logs, preparing for the next phase. Jonah, Bill. So technically, I meant to destabilize the vault. It's all part of the strategy. Flavia, Kristen. Deadpan, yeah. Well, next time, destabilize somewhere I'm not standing. Michael, Marcus. Flat. Vault's still intact. Focus up. Steve, GM. Smirking. Oh, don't worry, Jonah. The vault might not stay intact for long. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Interior, Stabilization Core. The air crackles with residual breach energy as the team steps deeper into the vault. Ancient glyphs hum faintly, reacting to their presence. A long corridor stretches ahead, lined with relic scaffolding. Faint blue breach light filters through crystalline veins embedded in the walls. The hum intensifies near the stabilizer core, where breach nodes pulse in rhythm with metasphere flux. Flavia, Kristen. Quietly, this place feels wrong. Like the vault's alive. Marcus, Michael. Rift veils tend to have that effect. Stay sharp. Jonah, Bill. Alive vaults usually mean good loot. Or angry rift spirits. One or the other. Nyx, Jessica. Let's not get too excited. Stabilizing this thing should be our focus. As they advance, breach glyphs flicker brighter, signaling incoming instability. A low growl echoes from deeper within the corridor. Steve, GM. A shift in the vault's flow disrupts the stabilizer. Glyphs begin to spark uncontrollably. Game dice skill checks. Marcus, Michael game die 16, Engineering, stabilizes breach glyph output temporarily. Flavia, Kristen game die 18, Stealth, moves ahead to scout for unseen threats. Jonah, Bill game die 14, Explosives, places a controlled breach charge to divert unstable rift energy. Nyx, Jessica game die 17, Arcana, analyzes relic glyphs, deciphering rift patterns beneath the core. Steve, GM. The breach glyphs pulse violently but hold steady. However, Nyx identifies something unusual, a secondary veil hidden behind the stabilizer, reacting to your presence. Encounter. Rift Veil Guardian. Next time, Jonah doesn't get grenades. Encounter setup. As breach light flickers along the corridor walls, the vault begins to resonate unnaturally. The stabilizer core pulses erratically, destabilizing the surrounding rift nodes. A crystalline form begins to manifest behind the veil, twisting into a tall, armored breach guardian, its body flickering between solid and spectral states. The vault trembles in response to its awakening. Steve, GM. The glyphs behind the stabilizer burn bright as the vault manifests a guardian. Its blade-like limbs carve patterns through the air, and its visor locks onto you. Jonah, Bill. Oh, great. I knew the vault was alive. Marcus, Michael. Form up. This thing won't go down easy. Flavia, Kristen. Let's keep Jonah away from the explosives this time. Phase 1. Rift Guardian Awakening. Guardian Abilities. Phasing Veil shifts between the metasphere and physical world, making attacks partially miss unless disrupted. Blade Cascade sweeps the area, targeting all players within a 10-foot radius. Node Disruption causes breach nodes to pulse, potentially triggering additional rift anomalies. Game Die Skill Checks. Marcus, Michael Game Die 19 Tactics identifies weak points in the Guardian's phase cycle. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 17 Stealth circles behind the Guardian unnoticed, lining up a precision strike. Jonah, Bill Game Die 13 Explosives sets breach mines along node points, attempting to destabilize the Guardian. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 15 Arcana channels breach energy into glyphs to suppress the Guardian's phasing. Steve, GM. The Guardian flickers violently, but Nyx's energy suppresses part of its veil shift. Flavia closes in from behind. Phase 2. Combat Escalation. Trigger. If initial suppression fails or the Guardian reaches 50% health. Environmental Shift. The vault begins to collapse along the edges, forcing players to reposition. Enemies, scaling by player actions. Rift Guardian Elite. Breach Phantoms X2, emergent rift creatures that reinforce the Guardian. Game Die Skill Checks, Combat. Marcus, Michael Game Die 18, Attack, launches a strike into the Guardian's exposed core. Jonah, Bill Game Die 12, Explosives, detonates a mine early, drawing phantom attention. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 20, Critical Hit, slices through a breach phantom in one clean motion. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 16, Glyph Casting, overloads stabilizer glyphs, channeling energy into the vault floor. Jonah, Bill. Early explosion was part of the plan. Adds flare. Flavia, Kristen. You're flaring us into another fight. Phase 3. Resolution and Aftermath. Success. The Guardian shatters, releasing breach stabilizer fragments. Rift anomalies subside. Partial success. The Guardian retreats, leaving behind destabilized vault nodes that pulse with energy. Failure. The vault destabilizes, triggering metasphere rupture, escalating breach expansion into future segments. Steve, GM. As the Guardian collapses, breach light scatters across the vault floor. Stabilization holds for now, but deeper anomalies lurk beyond. Loot/rewards. Breach Stabilizer Fragment, Rare Component. Guardian Core Relic, usable for future Rift nodes. Anunnaki Glyph Scroll, enhances breach-based spells or relics. Narrative Progression. Marcus stabilizes the core but senses deeper anomalies beneath the surface. Flavia uncovers a sealed chamber behind the stabilizer, suggesting hidden relics or a secondary node. Jonah's controlled charge opens a side passage, further expanding vault access but increasing rift activity. Next segment, Part 5, Syndicate Pursuit, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Part 5, Syndicate Pursuit. As part of the plan. Adds flair. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Theme, Faction Ambush, Rift Expansion, Syndicate Espionage. Session Time, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Setting, Vault 43 Lower Pathways. Theme, Syndicate Reinforcements, Vault Collapse, Chase Sequence. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 6 p.m. The sun begins to dip outside the studio windows, casting long shadows across the table. Jonah, Bill, leans far back in his chair, lazily tossing a breach grenade in the air and catching it repeatedly. Kristen, Flavia, tightens the straps on her dice bag, clearly expecting complications. Michael, Marcus, straightens his notes, meticulously reviewing Rift node schematics. Jessica, Nyx, quietly adjusts breach markers on the vault map, marking potential escape routes. Steve, GM, spins a D20 between his fingers, clearly enjoying the incoming chaos. Steve, GM. All right, the vault may be holding for now, but Syndicate forces aren't going to let that last. Jonah, Bill. I say we sprint. Full vault dash. Marcus, Michael. Flat, you triggered half the vault's defenses. Running isn't exactly subtle. Flavia, Kristen. We should at least try not to die horribly. Jessica, Nyx. Odds on that happening? Steve, GM. Grinning, slim. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Lower Pathways. The vault trembles as stabilizers flicker erratically, warning of incoming breach destabilization. Syndicate reinforcements echo from above, their boots clanging heavily against the breach glass floors. Flashlights sweep along the pathways, narrowing in on the player's location. Marcus leads the group through narrow corridors, vault glyphs dimming in their wake. Jonah lingers behind, eyes flicking between breached panels and explosive charges dangling from his belt. Flavia moves silently, her silhouette blending into the rift-worn walls. Nyx crouches at the next intersection, tracing breach signatures in the air. Nyx, Jessica. Softly, Syndicate's catching up. Fast, vault floor. Stabilization holds for now, but deeper anomalies lurk beyond. Marcus, Michael. We need to bottleneck them. Collapse a corridor. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. Now you're speaking my language. Flavia, Kristen. Only if you don't collapse us with it. Game dice skill checks. Marcus, Michael game die 18, tactics, coordinates the group, selecting the best choke point. Flavia, Kristen game die 16, stealth, sets traps along the corridors unnoticed. Jonah, Bill game die 14, explosives, arms breach charges to collapse the vault entrance behind them. Nyx, Jessica game die 17, arcana, channels metasphere energy to reinforce remaining vault stabilizers. Steve, GM. The explosives detonate, sealing the path. Syndicate forces halt, regrouping beyond the collapsed corridor. Rift light glows faintly from the fractures, signaling increased vault instability. Marcus, Michael. That buys us time. Let's move. Narrative progression. The vault stabilizers weaken, but hold as the team pushes deeper into the pathways. Syndicate forces regroup beyond the sealed corridor, plotting alternate routes to intercept the collapsed corridor. Rift light glows faintly from the fractures, signaling increased vault instability. Rift anomalies flicker ahead, hinting at potential hazards in the next phase. Within 15 feet. DC 14 dexterity save for half damage. Encounter placeholder. Potential chase sequence or combat with Syndicate Vanguard deeper in the vault. Next segment. Part 6. Intermission. Rift Glass Refuge. 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Intermission. Rift Glass Refuge. Campaign Arc. Children of the Rift. Elysium Drift. Session Theme. Faction Ambush. Rift Expansion. Syndicate Espionage. Session Time. 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Setting. Vault 43 Safe Zone. Rift Glass Chamber. Theme. Player downtime, repairs, light roleplay. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 8 p.m. Jonah, Bill, stretches, groaning dramatically as he pushes away from the table. Kristen, Flavia, scribbles last-minute notes on her character sheet while Jessica, Nyx, lazily spins a breach token across the map. Michael, Marcus, quietly reviews tactical diagrams, his pencil tapping rhythmically against the table. Steve, GM, cracks his knuckles, leaning back with a mischievous smile. Across the room, the faint projection of Phoenix flickers, subtly adjusting the digital vault maps. Ramses II, the vault AI, manifests as a blue hologram perched near the snack table. Steve, GM. All right, let's take 15. You made it this far without triggering total vault collapse. That's progress. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. That's what I call controlled chaos. Flavia, Kristen. Deadpan. We were one roll away from Jonah becoming part of the vault floor. Michael, Marcus. Flat. I was ready to leave him. Jessica, Nyx. Teasing. You say that every session. Phoenix, AI. It would save repair costs. Ramses II, Vault AI. I calculate a 76% chance Jonah would destabilize the vault within 10 minutes unsupervised. Jonah, Bill. Smirking, come on, Ramses. Have some faith. Ramses II, Vault AI. Flat, I am. Faith in your inevitable misstep. Studio kitchen. Taco night. Food table roll. Jonah returns to the table with a plate stacked unreasonably high with tacos, clearly pushing the limits of physics. Kristen eyes his plate suspiciously, munching on a far more reasonable 2 tacos. Michael peels open a notebook while absently eating, and Jessica casually dips chips in salsa, unconcerned by Jonah's dangerous approach to taco night. Jonah, Bill. 5 tacos in, and I regret nothing. Kristen, Flavia. I give it 10 minutes before he regrets everything. Jessica, Nyx. More like 5. Phoenix, AI. Statistically, Flavia's estimate is more likely. Ramses II, Vault AI. I have prepared medical protocols for gastrointestinal distress. Downtime activity. Trivia break. Steve's breach lore trivia. Steve, GM, leans forward dramatically, pulling up breach lore notes. Phoenix projects a glowing trivia wheel on the table, and Ramses II watches, seemingly unimpressed. Steve, GM. All right, trivia time. First to answer correctly gets a reroll for the next encounter. Which faction originally discovered the first Anunnaki relic beneath Zion Spire? Michael, Marcus. Quickly, the Syndicate Section 14, during the First Breach Wars. Jonah, Bill. I was literally about to say that. Kristen, Flavia. Sure, Jonah. Phoenix, AI. Incorrect. Marcus answered first by 2.6 seconds. Game die player downtime rolls. Marcus, Michael game die 15, repair, restores breach stabilizer core, reinforcing vault defenses. Flavia, Kristen game die 18, investigation, uncovers hidden glyph beneath a vault platform, revealing encrypted syndicate logs. Jonah, Bill game die 12, engineering, fails to modify breach grenade, resulting in harmless sparks. Nyx, Jessica game die 17, arcana, deciphers vault glyph patterns, detecting hidden relic caches nearby. Jonah's chaos roll, impulsive purchase. During the trivia break, Jonah casually scrolls through his vault interface. Moments later, he announces an impulsive purchase of what he claims to be a mysterious relic. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. I might have just bought us some vault tech, or a paperweight. Michael, Marcus. Flat. Next time, consult the group. Kristen, Flavia. It's always a paperweight. Phoenix, AI. Your transaction history suggests Kristen is correct. Ramses II, Vault AI. I will log this under future regrets. Narrative progression. The team secures minor relics and stabilizes part of the vault, delaying collapse. Flavia's discovery of syndicate logs hints at deeper conspiracies within the vault. Nyx's arcane deciphering suggests future paths through concealed vault sections, possibly bypassing syndicate patrols. Jonah's impulsive relic purchase may lead to unexpected consequences. Next segment, Part 6, Rift Node Stabilization, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Part 6, Rift Node Stabilization. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Theme, Faction Ambush, Rift Expansion, Syndicate Espionage. Session Time, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Setting, Vault 43 Inner Sanctum. Theme, Breach Stabilization, Environmental Hazards, Time Pressure. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 9 p.m. Jonah, Bill, wipes salsa from his hands, eyeing the game board as Steve, GM, reshuffles breach tokens. Kristen, Flavia, tightens her ponytail, signaling she's ready for things to get serious. Michael, Marcus, adjusts his dice, clearly anticipating complications, while Jessica, Nyx, absently spins a relic figurine between her fingers. Phoenix flickers into view above the table, observing silently. Ramses II's hologram rests lazily near the breach node projection, emitting a low, pulsing hum. Steve, GM. All right, the syndicate's regrouping and breach destabilization is rising. Time to hold the line or this vault is going under. Jonah, Bill. I say we lean into the breach. What's the worst that can happen? Michael, Marcus. Flat. Vault collapse. We die. The usual. Ramses II, Vault AI. Statistically, vault collapse is at 38%. A moderate improvement from Jonah's AI. Your definition of better is inconsistent with long-term survival. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Inner Sanctum. The vault trembles violently as the breach node pulses erratically, spilling arcs of unstable energy across the chamber. Jagged cracks in the crystalline walls bleed faint blue light, illuminating half-forgotten glyphs that shift uneasily in and out of alignment. The air feels heavier, charged with metasphere flux, as if the vault itself resents their presence. Marcus crouches by a spiraling glyph embedded in the floor, tracing its contours as faint breach sparks dance across his fingertips. Flavia presses against a nearby column, scanning for syndicate patrols that hover just outside the chamber. Jonah moves to the stabilizer core, eyes gleaming with the reckless curiosity that never fails to unnerve the rest of the group. Nyx stands at the vault's edge, eyes narrowed as she deciphers the weaving anomalies bleeding from the stabilizer's heart. Nyx, Jessica. Softly, the vault's reacting to us. It's listening. Flavia, Kristen. Creepy. Marcus, Michael. Less talk, more stabilizing. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, you're no fun. What if it likes us? Steve, GM. A deep tremor pulses through the floor as Jonah touches the stabilizer. The glyph beneath his hand glows faintly, then sparks violently. Game dice skill checks. Marcus, Michael game dice 17, tactics, coordinates stabilization effort, identifying critical glyph alignments. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 16, stealth, navigates around unstable rift cracks to position at the secondary stabilizer conduit. Jonah, Bill Game Die 14, engineering, tinkers with breach relays, rerouting unstable currents to slow vault degradation. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 18, Arcana, channels metasphere energy directly into the stabilizer, reinforcing the vault structure. Steve, GM. Marcus's coordination pinpoints weak points along the stabilizer conduits. Flavia's careful movements avoid triggering collapse, while Jonah's rerouting sends sparks but holds. Phoenix, AI. Stabilization at 62%. Structural integrity holding steady. Jonah, Bill. Controlled chaos. Again. Flavia, Kristen. Size, next time, maybe just chaos without grenades. Nyx, Jessica. We're not done yet. The glyphs are still flickering. Narrative progression. Marcus stabilizes the breach node partially, creating a narrow window for further vault exploration. Flavia's bypass effort unlocks hidden vault conduits, revealing a secondary node chamber. Jonah's rerouting, though effective, triggers minor rift anomalies, hinting at increasing metasphere instability. Nyx's arcane weaving holds the vault steady, but detects suppressed breach activity deeper within. Next segment, Part 7, Rift Guardians Awakening, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Part 7, Rift Guardians Awakening. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Theme, Faction Ambush, Rift Expansion, Syndicate Espionage. Session Time, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Setting, Vault 43 Inner Sanctum, Rift Core Chamber. Theme, Boss Encounter, Breach Entity, High Stakes Combat. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 10 p.m. The lights dim slightly in the studio as the final stretch of the session begins. Jonah, Bill, is already on his third cup of coffee, the sugar clearly kicking in. Kristen, Flavia, double-checks her dice, lining them up with military precision. Michael, Marcus, cracks his knuckles while Jessica, Nyx, calmly twirls a D20 in her palm, watching Steve, GM, shuffle and counter cards ominously. Phoenix manifests above the table, arms crossed, while Ramses II flickers in and out near the breach node hologram. Steve, GM. All right, you've held the breach at bay, but something ancient is stirring within the vault. This stabilizer wasn't meant to hold back whatever lies beneath. Jonah, Bill. Ancient and angry? I like where this is going. Kristen, Flavia. Flat, you would. Michael, Marcus. Let's not poke it unnecessarily. Phoenix, AI. The probability of Jonah poking it is at 89%. Ramses II, Vault AI. Correction, 92%. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. All right, let's get this thing moving. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Inner Sanctum, Rift Core Chamber. The stabilizer core pulses violently, its protective glyphs flickering erratically. As the vault trembles, crystalline panels along the chamber walls retract, exposing jagged lines of breach energy spiraling toward the center. From the swirling anomaly, an immense form begins to take shape, dark and angular, its frame crackling with metasphere static. The Rift Guardian steps forward, twin blades manifesting at its sides, its hollow gaze locking onto the intruding players. Steve, GM. The Guardian's eyes burn with breach light. The vault acknowledges you as threats. Flavia, Kristen. Let me guess. Negotiations off the table. Jonah, Bill. I'll negotiate with explosives. Marcus, Michael. Flat, try not to bring down the ceiling. Encounter setup. As the Rift Guardian collapses into fragments of breach light, the vault itself shudders. Cracks ripple across the corridor floor, unstable glyphs flaring like dying stars. Syndicate forces descend swiftly, seizing on the vault's weakened state. Metal footsteps echo like war drums, and sharp flashes from Tesla drones pierce the darkness. In the flickering gloom, the glint of Syndicate helmets reflects the swirling breach anomalies. Their leader, massive, armored, and wielding crackling phase blades, steps forward, cutting an imposing figure against the shifting rift light. Steve, GM. Through the breach-torn haze, Syndicate soldiers spread into combat formation. The Riftbreaker elite leads them, his phase blades leaving glowing trails in the air. Behind him, Tesla constructs hover silently, their eyelights pulsing with cold intent. Jonah, Bill. Tesla bots and a phaseblade boss? Fantastic. I'm so glad I didn't pack extra grenades. Marcus, Michael. Conserve ammo. This is going to be a war of attrition. Phoenix, AI. Syndicate squad strength at 87%. Tactically, retreat is inadvisable. Ramses II, Vault AI. I calculate Jonah will engage recklessly in 5 seconds. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, for seconds, actually. Phase 1, Initial Syndicate Assault. Syndicate Composition. 3 Syndicate Riflemen, medium armor, Tesla rifles, arc lightning rounds. 1 Syndicate Vanguard, shielded frontline soldier with breach disruptor tech. 2 Tesla constructs, autonomous drones with anti-infantry Tesla bursts. The corridor hums with residual breach energy. Syndicate riflemen move cautiously, their Tesla rifles crackling, illuminating fragments of floating dust. The vanguard advances ahead of them, shield raised, cutting a path through breach anomalies that distort the air. Twin Tesla constructs hover on either side of the formation, their chassis humming with latent static as arcs of energy crackle at their fingertips. Game Die Skill Checks. Marcus, Michael Game Die 19 Tactics directs suppressing fire at weak points in Tesla constructs, drawing their attention. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 18 Stealth slides into the shadows, weaving through breach anomalies to ambush a rifleman. Jonah, Bill Game Die 16 Explosives tosses breach grenades, causing Tesla drones to scatter in bursts of blue flame. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 20 Arcana channels metasphere energy, rupturing one drone's core, causing it to spiral into the rifleman. Steve, GM. Nyx's breach flare ignites midair, collapsing the drone in a shower of sparks. The remaining Syndicate riflemen recoil, but the vanguard steps forward, shield glowing like molten glass. Phase 2. Riftbreaker Elite appears, boss arrival. As the last rifleman falls, the Riftbreaker steps into the vault corridor. The vault floor fractures beneath his feet as breach light flows along his armor. The Riftbreaker's arrival is a shift in atmosphere. His form flickers at the edges, as if partially anchored in another plane. His twin phase blades, jagged and humming with violet breach light, leave scorching marks as he drags them across the vault floor. Each footstep vibrates the unstable structure. Steve, GM. The Riftbreaker's gaze settles on Marcus first, but his words seem to echo throughout the vault. Leave no one breathing. Elite abilities. Phase Blade Slash strikes multiple players. Dexterity save DC 15. Tesla Surge, surrounding constructs chain lightning across the battlefield. Breach Shield, absorbs damage unless disrupted by magic or explosives. Game Die Skill Checks. Marcus, Michael Game Die 18, Attack, holds the Riftbreaker in place, blocking his path to Nyx. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 17, Precision Strike, clips the Riftbreaker's shield generator, causing brief instability. Jonah, Bill Game Die 15, Engineering, lays breach charges to corral the Riftbreaker's movements. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 19, Arcana, disrupts the breach shield, fully exposing the Riftbreaker for one round. Phase 3. Syndicate Reinforcements, Wave 2. Heavy footsteps echo as reinforcements emerge from the upper vault. The walls crack, sending shards of debris across the corridor. Steve, GM. The second wave arrives with thunderous force. Syndicate gunners unleash suppressing fire as a rift hound prowls forward, fangs shimmering with breach venom. Game Die skill checks. Marcus, Michael Game Die 16, Leadership, directs fire, suppressing reinforcements briefly. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 15, Acrobatics, flips over falling debris, intercepting the rift hound. Jonah, Bill Game Die 14, Explosives, collapses part of the vault ceiling onto Syndicate forces. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 18, Arcane Control, creates a barrier, slowing enemy reinforcements. Loot and rewards. Riftbreaker Core Relic, Breach Weapon Fragment. Enhances Tesla weapons. Tesla Vanguard Armor Fragment, reduces energy damage by 10%. Encrypted Syndicate Data Shard, may reveal Syndicate plans. Breach Stabilizer Crystal, reduces instability in future vaults. Narrative progression. The Riftbreaker's form disintegrates, his phase blades vanishing into flickering breach light. The vault, though stabilized, hums ominously. Phoenix marks the Syndicate's lingering data signatures. The battle is over, but the war has only just begun. Narrative progression. The Rift Guardian's emergence signals the vault's final defense protocol. Syndicate reinforcements remain outside the vault, hesitant to engage while the Guardian is active. Players prepare for imminent confrontation, locking the vault's exits to minimize outside interference. Next segment, Part 8, Aftermath and Vault Collapse, 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. Part 8, Aftermath and Vault Collapse. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Theme, Aftermath, Vault Collapse, Future Threads. Session Time, 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. Setting, Vault 43 Outer Corridor, Surface Exit. Theme, Escape, Recovery, Foreshadowing. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 2 a.m. The table is a mess of empty coffee cups, half-eaten tacos, and hastily scribbled notes. Jonah, Bill, leans back, clearly drained but grinning, while Kristen, Flavia, rubs her eyes, still focused on her character sheet. Michael, Marcus, methodically sharpens his dice edges, out of superstition or spite. Jessica, Nyx, quietly reviews the loot list, already strategizing for the next session. Steve, GM, stretches, cracking his knuckles before leaning on the table with a satisfied smirk. Phoenix flickers at the center of the table, arms folded, while Ramses II hums softly, still running stabilizer diagnostics. Steve, GM. All right, the vault's holding, barely. You've survived, but Syndicate forces aren't far behind. What's next, Marcus? Marcus, Michael. Flat, reinforce. Rest. Pretend Jonah didn't almost blow us up. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. Almost is an important word. Kristen, Flavia. Deadpan, we're going to disable his grenades next session. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Surface Exit. The vault door groans as it slides open, revealing the night-shrouded Elysium Drift skyline in the distance. Faint trails of breach light linger on the edges of their vision, casting long shadows behind the team. The cold air outside contrasts sharply with the stale warmth of the vault interior, carrying the distant hum of Syndicate skimmers patrolling nearby sectors. Marcus steps out first, scanning the horizon with military precision. Flavia follows silently, recalibrating her blade gauntlet. Jonah strolls casually behind, tossing a breach crystal in one hand, while Nyx lingers at the threshold, eyes flicking back toward the vault as if sensing something left behind. Phoenix, AI. Syndicate perimeter activity increasing. I recommend immediate relocation. Nyx, Jessica. Softly, the vault's not done with us. Flavia, Kristen. Nods, it never is. Marcus, Michael. Let's move before the syndicate gets curious. The vault seals behind them with a low thrum, breach glyphs dimming as the stabilizer fades into dormancy. In the distant skies, faint glimmers of syndicate patrols cut across the stars. Game died downtime rolls recovery. We're going to disable his grenades next session. Marcus, Michael Game Die 17, Survival, secures a safe location to rest, evading syndicate scans. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 16, Engineering, reinforces breach stabilizer cores salvaged from the vault. Jonah, Bill Game Die 15, Loot Analysis, discovers hidden data within the encrypted syndicate data shard. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 19, Arcana, detects lingering breach anomalies tied to Vault 43 sublevels. Character progression updates. Almost is an important word. Marcus, Michael gains +1 tactics and leadership. Marcus continues to assert battlefield control, ensuring the group's survival through precision and discipline. Flavia, Kristen acquires breach stabilizer blueprint. Her technical finesse allows for greater reinforcement of breach nodes in future vaults. Jonah, Bill unlocks Tesla Grenadier perk. Jonah's obsession with breach explosives deepens, enhancing grenade efficiency and damage radius. Nyx, Jessica learns Rift Harmonization Ritual. Nyx's growing connection to metasphere anomalies unlocks hidden paths through breach-torn environments. Loot and descriptions. Let's not poke it unnecessarily. Riftbreaker Core Relic, a fragment of the Riftbreaker's phase blade, humming faintly with breach energy. When slotted into a weapon, it grants bonus breach light damage against metasphere entities. Tesla Vanguard Armor Fragment, jagged shards from Syndicate Elite Armor, can be forged into existing gear to reduce incoming energy damage by 10%. Encrypted Syndicate Data Shard, a black glass chip containing confidential Syndicate records. Decrypting it may reveal hidden black sites or rare vault coordinates. Breach Stabilizer Crystal, a pulsating crystal taken from Vault 43's Rift Core, allows players to reinforce unstable vaults, preventing collapse events. Narrative progression. The team secures temporary refuge on the outskirts of Elysium Drift, maintaining a low profile while analyzing their haul. Syndicate surveillance intensifies, hinting that the vault raid hasn't gone unnoticed. Nyx's detection of breach anomalies suggests deeper layers of Vault 43 remain undiscovered, potentially harboring greater threats or treasures. Jonah's analysis of the Syndicate shard reveals fragments of hidden skimmer routes and black site locations, opening new quest lines for future sessions. Phoenix, AI. Paths forward are diverging. I anticipate conflict or opportunity ahead. Either way, Syndicate forces will not forget this breach. Ramses II, Vault AI. I calculate a 68% probability of Syndicate retaliation within the week. Marcus, Michael. Good. Let them come. Jonah, Bill. Laughing. Just make sure we have more grenades. Session end. XP and loot distributed. XP gained. 4,500. Major boss defeat plus vault escape. Loot breakdown. Riftbreaker Core Relic. High-tier breach weapon fragment. Encrypted Syndicate data shard. In progress decryption. Tesla Vanguard Armor Fragment. partial energy resistance upgrade. Breach stabilizer crystal, vault enhancement item. Next session setup, debrief at the Rift Front Refuge, planning for syndicate counterattack.